1. Welcome to Made for More Living.
One small step for man.
With Johnny Jennings.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
The fastest and most exciting hour of news, events, and real estate in Northern California.
And this is a fact that was proved.
Powered by EXP Realty. Online at madeformoreliving.com.
Does everybody know what time it is?
Get ready. Here we go.
Hey, Johnny, with the rising costs of energy from PG&E, how have you seen this impact buyers' decisions when it comes to choosing a home in Northern California that's specifically in PG&E territory?
Yeah, so it's hard to describe to somebody who hasn't been living in PG&E territory if they've never dealt with, so I live in PG&E territory right now in an urban area, so this isn't rural, and I was sitting outside smoking a cigar, working, my laptop was plugged in, and all of a sudden, it's a beautiful day. There's no storms. There's no wind. There's no reason for the power to go out. And then all of a sudden, my laptop stops charging, and the whole house is dead. Like, everything is out. I'm like, what in the world? And I hop on my phone, and there's an outage.
There's your text message from PG&E going, hey, we see you've been impacted by an outage.
Well, I got it about 30 minutes later, but I was like Googling on PG&E. But yeah, so for people who haven't experienced that, they're like, man, that doesn't sound real. That sounds more like third world. That doesn't sound like the America I grew up in. It sounds like fake news. But then when you move there and you're like, oh my gosh, this is totally real. Or if there's a storm, I have another buddy who lives in it's not super rural, but it's not like suburbia. And he was without power for 4 or 5 days.
Yes.
And he just, thank goodness he had a backup system. But if he hadn't had that, many of his neighbors, their food went bad. They were staying in hotels. They were visiting friends and family in the area because Roseville Electric was cranking away. SMUD was okay, but he wasn't. So.
Yeah, I think in PG&E territory, I also live in PG&E territory, and if you're not losing power 10, 15 times in a year for various lengths of time, we just had another outage the other day, thankfully this time because they were pre-planned, they were replacing a pole, but it just seems very, archaic and old, and that's part of the grid problem that PG&E has.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason that they're spending so much money, but... So are you seeing homeowners ask more about solar options? I mean, like energy costs are now more of a significant factor in home ownership expense than they've ever been, rivaling property taxes and home insurance and stuff like that.
So definitely homeowners are asking about it if they're aware of the issue. If they're not, it's, in my opinion, it's a realtor's obligation to inform their client. Hey, just so you're aware, if you can see Roseville, you could toss your electrical extension cord and you could plug into your neighbor's house, but just because you're close doesn't mean your utilities are going to be the same. So you need to be aware of the difference because it is a stark difference. One example would be we had a friend who was shopping and they were looking in the Roseville area, Roseville Granite Bay, and they ended up buying in Roseville. Their utility bill ended up being $300 a month. Model match home. A couple streets over in PG&E territory, $1,200 a month. That's a $900 a month swing right now. It's not. And is that going to get better or worse with time?
Yeah,
it's been getting worse, and so it's definitely something buyers are aware of, and sellers need to be aware of it too. That hey, whether or not you have solar, that's going to impact the desirability of your home.
So would it be fair to say that $900 difference is massive?
Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that if a buyer of a home in PG&E territory also lives in PG&E territory, that they're probably very aware of the issue? Say it differently, somebody coming from Roseville Electric, selling a house in Roseville, buying a house in PG&E territory, they may not assign as much value to solar as somebody that has lived in PG&E territory, paid those $1,200 bills, and now is looking for some form of mitigation in the new home.
Absolutely. If they're living in PG&E territory, they're probably shopping houses with solar. Or they're wanting a discount on the house that does not have solar because they know what's going to happen. They've been living it. And what we're seeing too is solar's become way more prevalent than even in the last 3 to 4 years. Very builders are now obviously required to install solar, but to move their properties, they're providing paid for like owned solar systems as incentives to people purchasing homes. And so if you are, and that's your competition. Like there are a lot of people who are reselling homes, but are now competing with the builders who are selling these paid for solar systems.
Yeah. So now you can buy your house, new construction, new solar, owned, and now effectively a substantially reduced, if not completely mitigated utility bill.
Yep.
And in this time right now, especially in an inflationary time that we're seeing where costs of goods and services and everyone's feeling the pinch.
Yeah.
Property taxes, high. Insurance, fire, hazard insurance,
which tends to go hand in hand with PG&E territory.
With PG&E, and they're the biggest reason why, because it's their fires and equipment that sparked those fires that created the devastation, causing property taxes. I say to people all the time, it's not just the utility bill that PG&E is affecting; they're also affecting your housing insurance as well, and hazard insurance for fire coverage.
Yeah, there's so many people that are looking to move because just the fire insurance has become unsustainable for their families.
It's pricing. What's happening is people are being priced out of their own homes or having to make the concession of living more like Amish folks live without electricity. Yeah. I talk to people all the time that are sacrificing lifestyle because they can't afford the utility bill. They're calling it energy poverty when you can't spend the money necessary to be comfortable in your own home because of the expense of the energy costs.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up like that, right? Like I remember mom and dad saying, hey, turn the AC off. You can only run it during peak hours. And that was, 20, 25 years ago. I can't imagine you moving into an area thinking, hey, this is what, because a lot of people buy based off the monthly. Like, what's my monthly budget? And they buy and they want a fixed mortgage because then their monthly budget, that portion of it is fixed. But now there's been two main variables that have changed: one, utilities, and two, homeowners insurance. And so that has just impacted people's budgets significantly. And so now they had it down to where they could live comfortably, not live in energy poverty, but now they're being forced to pull that lever in order to make ends meet.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Do you believe, Johnny, that homes with solar energy and battery systems are becoming more desirable in the current market? Specifically, homes with solar and batteries. How are people viewing solar only versus solar with batteries?
Yeah, so definitely solar, and we're starting to see a trend towards batteries. It depends on where you're living. If you're living in more of an urban area, then batteries can get you by. But if you're living in the foothills, then people are, in my opinion, it's not an option. You need a generator. Even if it's something you pick up at Harbor Freight, or if you get a Generac system installed, you need a generator.
Yeah, I think the best current guidance that I can give on an all-weather energy system is solar primary, batteries secondary, generator third.
Yep.
That way if you've got, for example, in the wintertime, if you've got a multi-day outage because of a massive inclement, weather event, that now you've got solar with battery backup. Because what a lot of people don't realize about batteries is batteries are a darkness bridge. They bridge, they store all the energy, the excess energy that the solar system creates throughout the day, to then bridge sundown with sun up. And so they'll push energy into the home overnight. But a lot of people don't realize that, generally speaking, there's 8-10 hours of stored energy there. It's not multiple days worth of stored energy. So to your point, if you're in a rural area, in the mountains, in the foothills, susceptible to power loss frequently and or inclement weather challenges, then I think battery backup is a big selling point. And we're starting to see that more with people that have electric vehicles as well.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Talk about, you're saving on gas, but then you plug into PG&E, it's like, oh my goodness. You see that, you get those nasty, what is it, energy shaming when you get the bill from PG&E?
The worst now is if you sign up for their text messages and they'll start texting you halfway through the month. Well, you're way out of whack here compared to your neighbors. And it's energy shaming.
Totally.
We're going to coin that term.
All right.
Here's another question for you. Value addition, adding value with solar. It's often said that solar adds value to a home. From your perspective, how much weight do buyers place on solar when evaluating a property's overall value right now in this current market?
Right now in today's current market, well, it depends on who you're getting your energy from, right? If you're getting Roseville Electric, and I mean, people want solar. Even people in Roseville Electric are wanting solar, but they'll reach out to solar companies, and the more reputable ones will like, hey, like we're not going to save you a whole lot of money. Like it doesn't make sense. But to me, that just speaks to the desirability of solar. Like even people like wanting to lower their monthly utility costs, even in Roseville Electric. And so when you're trying to assign a value to it, the easiest way that I communicate to clients, like, hey, is this a good fit, or is the solar going to benefit you? Well, think about your monthly budget. People are buying the house not necessarily based on the purchase price, but on the payment, because when interest rates were two and in the 2s and 3s, prices soared, and all of a sudden interest rates came, they rose from 3 all the way up to the 7s, and all of a sudden, and then you saw prices like stop rising, and so it wasn't the purchase price that was doing that, it was the monthly that was being impacted. And so if you are determining, hey, how much value is my solar system going to add to my home, how much is that impacting that person's monthly budget? Are you saving them $100, $300, $900? Well, now that's something tangible that person can hold on to and understand. And that's right now. Yes, the system, and you understand this better than I do, but the system will degrade over time, but also energy costs are going up over time.
Yes. 100%.
And so does that help?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and it does definitely help. I do think it does matter. So prioritization-wise, for the benefit of our audience,
okay,
let's think of it this way. If PG&E is $100, okay, in cost, let's say it's $100. SMUD is going to be $60. Roseville Electric's going to be $25.
Okay.
That's kind of the cost spectrum. So to your point, if you're buying a house in Roseville territory, or for that matter, we experience this, SMUD is more similar to Edison down in Southern California.
Okay.
So, and then San Diego Gas and Electric is more of an equivalent of PG&E. So I do think it does matter what area somebody's looking at and what their personal experience has been with the utility that they pay now as to the value that they may or may not assign.
Yep.
And additionally, somebody that's already benefited or had the exposure to solar, I think is much more willing to want or desire a solar home
Absolutely.
themselves.
Once you have solar, you don't want to not have solar.
Who wants to be 100% fully exposed, like that terrible dream you had, when you were younger as a 7-year-old kid showing up to school without any clothes on? Who wants to be fully exposed to PG&E?
Oh my gosh, no. Yeah, you want to wear those clothes. I want clothes.
You want to have the benefit of solar for sure. There's no question. So here's a question that I would ask. How do you assign some measure of potential value? I think everyone in our industry agrees solar adds value to a home, but everyone disagrees on how much. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's a fluid thing, because again, we're talking about different areas. So PG&E, Roseville, SMUD, depending on where you're living in the state, that's going to assign a different value. And then what the future holds also depends on what those companies do. But what I compare solar to, like my wife, she's a real estate broker as well. We were just talking about this. And a lot of flippers, when they're flipping a home, if there is no central heating and air, like say it's an older home, they're without a doubt, I don't know any flipper that will not, that skips installing central heating and air. Solar is becoming the new central heating and air, like the new AC system. Once you have AC in your house or in your car, you don't want to have a car that doesn't have AC or a home that doesn't have AC. Once you have solar, you don't want to not have solar, and that trend is rising exponentially. And so as far as it impacting value and desirability down the road, to me it's just you're seeing this hockey stick effect of houses with solar are being left in the dust, and houses with solar there's a massive interest in those homes.
Yeah, I do think I do think where somebody lives and their prior experience does play a role in that. And then in the next segment, I want to talk about some statistics that we've seen from both Zillow and some other research I've done on Home Value Edition. We'll look at that. You're smiling about the Zillow one. We'll dissect that one. I don't like that one a lot, but I do think that as time goes on, this is only going to be further reinforced with buyer decisions. I think the solar equation is becoming more and more commonplace with more and more transactions just because of the proliferation of it.
Correct.
Partly due because of 2019's building code change, but also partly due because of just the rapid rise of energy costs.
Yeah, I mean, we just had a friend work with you, and their house was built prior to 2019, but they wanted solar. And so you have all these new houses being built, thousands of new homes being built with solar, and then you have thousands of pre-existing homes that are adding solar. It's just a matter of time before nearly everybody has it.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with that. Awesome. This has been illuminating.
So, Mike, listen to this. One of our listeners, Sabrina, she wanted to sell her home, but she didn't want to go through all the processes of open houses and dealing with different offers and negotiations.
Oh, yeah.
She just wanted a cash offer, bam, and be done with it. So, who did she call? Of course, Johnny Jennings with the Tom Daves team and Made for More Realty. They brought her a dream offer. She accepted it, was even able to stay in her home after closing so she could make a smooth move to her next house, which Johnny Jennings helped her buy.
Expect more, get more with Johnny Jennings and the Tom Daves team at Made for More Realty. Just Google Made for More Realty today and get more for your home. License number 581837.
This is Made for More Living with Johnny Jennings, powered by eXp Realty. Online at madeformoreliving.com.
All right, Johnny, just piggybacking on that value increase, I want to share some information that I've shared with others. So, read a lot of information on how much value solar might add to a property. Zillow states on their research, understanding that I'm speaking to a realtor, and most realtors I've spoken to don't put a lot of stock in what Zillow thinks.
Well, it's an algorithm.
Yeah, there you go. But they say 4% value increase, and I've always hated that number because I'll give you the context relative to our already existing conversation. If I take a $2 million house in SMUD territory that's got a $250 utility bill, solar added to that house is not going to increase its value 4%. Now, having said that, if I take a $500,000 manufactured home in Placer County that now has a $700 a month utility bill with PG&E, adding solar to that property might make more than a 4% difference in the value of that property.
Absolutely.
So I haven't loved Zillow's metric, but there was another study that was done that I think was better in relation to pure benefit, and it was a study commissioned by the Department of Energy. And effectively what the study came back and itemized or realized or concluded was that for every dollar that solar can mitigate in terms of somebody not having to pay that to the utility annually, it created about $20 in value in the mind of a purchaser or a buyer of that property. So if I can eliminate, back to your point, if you can eliminate the utility bill, two houses exactly the same, one makes its own power, one doesn't, aren't you going to assign more value to the one that isn't exposed to PG&E versus the one that isn't, and then how much? So that study I felt was better.
I agree.
So everybody thinks solar adds value. Nobody can agree on how much, and I think it's that value dynamic because the value of a house is 100% dependent on the buyer, right?
Yeah.
It's a free market. So if you find a buyer that has lived in Texas where the energy cost is 13 cents a kilowatt hour, they may not assign as much value to buying a house in PG&E territory where right now in the summer, daytime, 43 cents a kilowatt hour, evening time, 62 cents a kilowatt hour.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So what are your thoughts on those two? Zillow versus the study on the $1 for every or $20 for every dollar you can save.
Zillow's classic Zillow. They just typed in an algorithm and just said that'll work. But that's not. It comes down to the budget. At the end of the day, what people are looking for is how is this impacting me personally. And that second study does that. I do have a question, though. So $1 saved, $20 in value. Is that saved? So if you save, say, $900, is that $1 saved over a period of like a year?
Yes.
Okay.
So think of it this way. Let's say solar saves somebody $3,000 a year. Okay. In theory, what they're saying is that would add $60,000 of value to the property based on their study.
Got it. Okay.
So the idea is that after somebody buys the house, if they can mitigate that utility bill, back to your affordability, right? Everything's about monthly payment and affordability.
Yep.
If I can mitigate the monthly cost of the energy substantially, everyone agrees that adds value. This study just came back with a specific number. And I'm not saying I agree with it, because I think it's more fluid than that. I think it has to do with individual buyers and what their personal experience is and how much energy load and exposure they've had.
Yeah.
You know,
if you're a single person living by yourself and you work and travel a lot for work, your energy usage is going to be lower than a family of 7, and dad works at home and they all watch TV and game and charge their EVs. You know?
Yeah. So there's a lot of people, the solar industry, even though it generates energy with sunlight, there's a lot of shady folk.
There you
solar,
go.
Right?
Dad joke.
Yeah, there you go. There's a lot of shady folk in solar. So I'm not one of these guys that says, hey, it's going to, add X, Y, Z. I mean, I always try to have this conversation with people that I think solar is valuable. But I think the other component to it, let's dig into this just for a moment. I think that there's a difference between the value of owned solar, it's on the house, it's paid for, it exists, it makes energy, versus leased solar.
Yeah.
I think there's a big difference between those two, because, owned solar means I effectively don't have any payment for the system at all.
You're just prepaid.
Yeah, so when I buy it, whatever it produces is helping me to mitigate my bill. I think owned solar probably has the edge over the other options in terms of, most value increase if you're going to look at the different methods that you could use to buy solar.
Yep.
Own versus leases versus, let's say, power purchase programs.
And it's the easiest to understand, honestly.
Yeah.
So most of the value gets muddied when somebody's like, okay, what is a PPA? Because all they're wanting to know is how much money am I going to save? That's all they want to know. If it's owned, that's easier for them to calculate in their heads. Like, is there going to be a true up?
Yeah.
There's just, so some people are like, yeah, my monthly bill's only $15, but then they have a big true up, and so it's just understanding at the end of the day, that buyer needs to know how much that solar is going to help them.
Yes.
And I agree with you. Owned is the best. It's cleanest.
I think what's going to happen is, I think over time, I think knowledgeable folks like yourself, realtors like yourself, I think if you have houses that have solar, I think the conversation with somebody that's an expert in the solar business is really going to help guide the advantage or disadvantage of the difference in the programs, right? So back to your point, owned solar is the easiest to understand. You mentioned a true-up bill. So true-up bills are an example of solar not making enough energy to meet that particular family's needs. So along with this discussion is that this idea that solar is not a one-size-fits-all solution for every house.
Yep.
Stated differently, I can take a house built by the same builder in the same neighborhood on the same side of the street with the same exact roof orientation, equal houses for all intensive purposes, put 2 different families in them, and one house could be using twice as much energy as the other house is using.
My house would be the one using twice as much.
My house would also be the one using twice as much energy as well.
I love it. I love the AC.
Yeah, I love the AC. I got an electric car. Those kind of things happen. But point being is that when somebody buys a new house, the biggest occurrence, so the lay person out there generally thinks if they get a negative balance true-up bill, if they end up owing the utility some big chunk of money at the end of the year because the solar didn't produce as much, they assign it as a solar problem, that the solar didn't do what it was supposed to do. And I like to tell people that's incorrect most of the time. I mean, it could be an issue, but I don't know what size shoe you wear, but let's say it's a size 11. You can't take your size 11 foot and put it into a size 7 shoe. Nor can I take somebody using 16,000 kilowatt hours of energy and make that fit into somebody else's bought solar system 5 years ago that only produces 10,000 kilowatt hours of energy, right? So the true up is an example of the system being undersized. It's not making enough energy. So that then speaks to, even though a house has solar, it doesn't mean it's going to meet the needs of the new existing buyer that's looking at it.
Would it be a good way to maybe just say, hey, this is the amount of production you can expect from the system. This is the average cost per month or average kilowatt.
Yes.
And then here's what the savings are going to be.
Yeah.
So that way it's the same across the board.
Yeah. So the biggest challenge for people, for an existing homeowner, would be trying to properly communicate how much it might save a new buyer because they bought a system 4 years ago, 5 years ago, might have completely mitigated their bill. They haven't experienced what we've been experiencing in the last 5 years as Californians in PG&E territory. And I talk to people every single day. I've got solar, so I haven't been experiencing it. But the idea is that the rates keep rising.
Yeah.
The last week, 4th rate increase for PG&E this year, just
Unreal.
approved by the CPUC, right? So the challenge is if you bought solar before, go back 10 years, PG&E Energy was only 25 cents a kilowatt hour. You've been living your life. Solar's been working. It's hard to explain to somebody that system is now mitigating what could be $700 a month had they not gotten it. Right?
Yeah, and so they're pissed because they have the true up.
Correct. So the easiest thing to do is to figure out how much the system is producing and then quantify that in current cost with the utility to create the contrast between how it's benefiting and I do that a lot with people that have a negative balance true up because they feel like solar was the problem. And I'll say to them, solar wasn't really the problem. The system size is the problem. This system is mitigating this much of your current expense.
Love
Stated
that.
differently, it would have been your true up bill of $3,000, which is $250 a month, without the current system would have been $6,000.
Yeah. That saved you $4,000.
Yeah. So those kind of conversations I think are going to be meaningful in the conversation with a potential buyer, as the agent representing the buyer or as an agent representing a seller to understand the existing system on the house.
So for somebody who's listening, trying to figure out, okay, how can I figure that math out? How do they do it? Is it based off of when they go through their paperwork and they're looking at what the system's supposed to produce? How would they back of a napkin do that math? Yeah,
and it would have to be that. It would have to be back of the napkin math. But effectively do this. Take whatever that system is producing, and because PG&E, we're sticking to PG&E because they're the biggest offender, right?
Yeah.
PG&E current rates, 43 to 62. Let's just use 50 cents.
Okay.
So figure out, because the idea is if you use more tier 2 energy because you get home from work, you're going to have a higher cost per kilowatt hour versus a retired couple that goes to bed at 9 o'clock that doesn't use a lot of energy in the evening time and not as exposed. So I think the 50 cents is probably a little bit of an overestimation erring against a homeowner, but I think it's going to be more accurate than any other method. But take the current generation of the system, multiply that times 50 cents, and that's the net effect of what they're not paying PG&E if that system's producing that.
So if it's what's a typical system on a home?
Size-wise? Well, the average homeowner uses about 11,600 kilowatt hours of energy a year. And the only specificity I can give to you of that is that's the total amount of consumed energy in California divided by the number of houses. I don't know what that means in terms of size of house, age, 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom. I don't know any of that. But 11.6, so let's just call it 12,000 kilowatt hours, average home in California.
And then what size systems do you see installed a lot?
Oh man, that's as varied as how many different eyeglass prescriptions do you see as
different
an
cars
eyeglass
on the
doctor,
road,
right? Yeah. It's 100% dependent on energy usage. I mean, I get with some people, we get some people that call into our radio show. And by the way, if somebody wants more solar information, you can text solar to 84503. But when people text into our radio show, effectively what we see is I've seen people with 5,000 kilowatt hours of total usage, and I sit here and imagine, because I'm a high energy user just like you, I'm like, what kind of life are they living where you're only using 5,000 kilowatt hours of energy? Like you're very conscious about using power. And I've met some people that are using 35, 40,000. I mean, I think my highest residential consumption that I've worked out a solar system for was like 62,000 kilowatt hours, so almost 5 times what an average home would normally be in California.
Okay, so if they have like a 30,000 kilowatt system, then they'll just divide that by 50 cents.
So think of it this way: kW is the size of the system as watts. So K stands for 1,000 watts. So a 10 kW system is basically a 10,000 watt system. that 10,000 watt system will roughly produce 15,000 kilowatt hours. So there's a difference between KW and KWH.
Learn something.
So using a car analogy, think of KW as the horsepower of your car, the maximum power that it can generate. And then KWH is your annual mileage driven. So in energy, KW is the size of the system, panel count times the wattage. If I've got 20 panels that are each 400 watts apiece, that's an 8,000 watt system.
Okay.
20 times 400. So that's 8,000 watts. That 8,000 watt system will generally produce about 12,000 kilowatt hours.
Okay.
The relationship between KW and KWH ideally is 1 to 1.5 in terms of production. So what somebody listening right now would want to do is take whatever their production in kilowatt hours is, multiply that times that 50 cents.
Got it.
And
Okay.
they're going to get real close to
what you're saving.
Yes, to what you're saving,
whether or not
what
you
that
have a
benefit.
true up or not. Like
Yes.
this is how much money you have put back in your that solar system is working for you.
For an existing seller of an existing solar system, that would be a great thing to have in the write-up of the listing, especially in PG&E territory, right? You really want to sell the benefit. This helps us mitigate what would have been $800 a month, $1,200 a month, $1,500 a month in cost. If you can quantify the value for a buyer, then that's going to make them feel more comfortable, right?
And it feels real.
Yeah.
Like it's instead of like what's a kilowatt hour, like what does this really mean? It's nebulous. you know? But then all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, hey, this last year it saved them $8,000 or $6,000 in utility costs. Wow, that's $6,000, that's $500 a month. That's a car payment.
And I don't see that done. I don't ever see write-ups where in the listing someone's talking about the real world mitigation of the cost today. I think that's an anchor that should be implemented by more folks. But it's you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? So
Okay, Matt, we all know the importance of finding someone you can trust. And then when you find that person, you want to use them over and over again, which is what happened with Betty. She had worked with Johnny Jennings and the Made for More team to sell her home previously. But when it came time to sell Betty's mom's home in Roseville so she could move her into a retirement home, of course, she called our friend Johnny Jennings at the Made for More team. They found her the perfect buyer for the home and negotiated a quick as-is sale so they could get their money as soon as possible to help mom get into her new retirement home smoothly.
Because you expect more, get more with Johnny Jennings and the Tom Daves team at Made for More Realty, brokered by EXP. Just Google Made for More Realty today and get more for your home. License number 581837.
This is Made for More Living with Johnny Jennings, powered by EXP Realty. Online at madeformoreliving.com.
All right, Johnny, here's another question for you. One of the major concerns that we hear from folks is the difficulty in potentially transferring, let's say, solar leases or finance agreements to new buyers. How often do you encounter this issue, and how does it impact the sale?
Well, I can't think of, out of all the homes we've sold, a single sale not going through. So it always works out. Okay. But it is definitely a bottleneck. It's probably one of the hardest parts in a transaction with the home that has solar on it. And it's not because of the agent, and it's not because of the seller, and it's not because of the buyer. It's the solar company that it's just hard to get a hold of them.
Yeah.
And so if a house has solar, what we recommend people do is have a copy of your contract. Have a copy of your contract and know who to contact at that solar company, because oftentimes they won't even begin the process of transferring ownership until you're in escrow. So it's not like something you can typically start ahead of time. Hopefully that'll change. But what ends up happening where it gets sticky is the person that is living in the home, the seller, can't find the paperwork. They don't know who to contact, and now we're burning days, and we're in escrow. And now the buyer's wanting that information for their inspection period so they can do their due diligence on the property, and we're burning days. And then they get it, and then we call them. And then they say, well, hey, we'll get back to you. And then it takes 3, 9, sometimes days or longer to hear back from the solar company. And so when you're trying to do something with speed and urgency in a real estate transaction, like the typical transaction we're seeing right now is about 20, 21 days. And you've burned up, 9 days waiting to hear back from the solar company. You're calling every day, twice a day, trying to get a hold of somebody. That's typically where we see the issues. But I wouldn't let that scare anybody because, like I said, we've never had a transaction not go through.
Yeah.
Because of solar.
Yeah. So let me talk about this a little differently. So I've theorized and postulated before that there's when you go to buy a house, there's so many other things that are competing for your wallet, like your money, right? So you buy a house, and the first thing you want to do is personalize it. Maybe you want to change the landscaping, flooring, painting, whatever. So the whole idea that somebody's going to then want to, either prioritize adding something like solar or, the other contrast to that is before buying the house, take on somebody else's debt in a solar lease or loan.
Yeah.
I think that that's the biggest reason people have pause. Like somebody falls in love with a house, realizes it has solar, and maybe it's a solar loan or a lease, and we're seeing difficulty. The industry has seen difficulty in terms of transferring those. But I think the industry is meeting the challenge. I think that what we're seeing right now is versions of contracts that are coming out and agreements that are coming out because solar is much more widely adopted now than it was even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I think the marketplace is changing, and I think what we're seeing is better versions, quicker transactions happen with varying different contracts. And we talked about this one contract. I'll illuminate a little bit more. But do you think that there's a difference between finance versus lease versus owned when it comes to?
So lease meaning you're leasing it from the company.
Yeah.
And finance means you have a monthly payment.
Yeah. Our experience has been leases are the stickiest to transfer. Because there's
the person has to qualify.
The person has to qualify, and it's harder to qualify for leases than traditional financing. If I go lease a car, I have to have a better credit profile than somebody that finances a car.
Yep.
Right? So the same thing is true of leases. Leases, and then I think that there is a bit of a negative connotation with a lot of folks about this idea of a lease, that there's negative energy associated with the term lease. So somebody falls in love with a house, now I got to take over this lease. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. So obviously in the short term, you're saving money. At the end of the day, your cost should be lower than what it would be if you were buying directly from the from PG&E, from the utility provider. But sometimes people just they like to think about things, and a lot of people overthink it, and they're like, "Well, I want to put my own solar system on, or I want to do this, or I want to do that," and now that lease is in the way. And so sometimes it can be a deterrent. But I've never seen anybody not buy a house because of the lease. It's been more of like a mark against the property, like, oh, the backyard's not as big as I wanted. Oh, there's a solar lease. I wish it was owned, and then we'll just write out the lease, and then we'll get the solar system we want.
On the negotiation side, how often do you see a buyer want to negotiate with the seller to have the seller pay off the system?
Oh, that's a really good question. Almost always.
Okay.
Almost always. And it's weird because when you're qualifying for a home loan, they don't factor in your estimated utility usage, like in your debt to income ratio. That's not part of the conversation. But then when there's a solar lease, all of a sudden
now that's part of the debt to income ratio.
Now
that's part of the equation.
Yeah.
And it's possible that if somebody didn't pay it off, that buyer may not qualify to both buy the house and qualify to take over the lease, right?
Yeah. And so what we are seeing is a lot of homeowners will pay off the lease.
Yeah.
So
let me give you a contrast to that. So what I mentioned before was more and more change within the industry. So there's a company out of Florida, NextEra Energy, third largest utility in the nation today. They own Florida Power and Light in Florida. They're trying to muscle into PG&E territory right now and compete with PG&E for energy business from homeowners in PG&E territory. And they're doing so on the back of solar. So they can't come in and replicate PG&E's utility infrastructure, energy grid.
Yep.
PG&E generates a lot of energy from hydroelectric power from watershed off the Sierra Nevada mountains. And so it's very difficult for somebody to come in and replicate that. They can't do that. But PG&E doesn't own the sun, although I bet they'd like to, and they don't own sunlight. So the idea is that this company will install a power plant, a system, a solar generating power plant with battery storage and photovoltaic panels to create the energy that the system is producing. They'll do all the permitting, do all the labor, do all of that at zero out-of-pocket cost to a homeowner. as long as the homeowner agrees to purchase the energy that the system produces. Now, for context, anybody that's listening right now can look at their PG&E bill. You'll see two charges for your energy cost. One is generation, what it actually costs to make the energy. And then the secondary or ancillary charge is delivery. What a lot of people don't realize is it's twice as expensive to get the energy to your home as it costs to make the energy in the first place. So if PG&E charges you $200 to make the energy, they'll charge you $400 additional to get it to your house. You now have a $600 utility bill for $200 worth of actual energy.
Wow.
So the benefit of having the solar plant at the house and creating a situation where somebody can make solar energy at the property is there is no delivery charge. All you've got is the sun energy. All you've got is the making of the energy. So that's why it's cheaper. So these programs, guaranteed transferable, it's not debt. You're not taking over somebody's loan. It's not a lease. You're not taking over somebody's lease. Both of those show up on a credit profile or credit report. This is a power purchase program. It's the closest thing to having an alternative to PG&E where you can source your energy from the sun and deal with a different utility company as the primary source of your purchasing, and then PG&E becomes the ancillary or secondary source. Do you see that being maybe an answer to some of the challenge of transferability, because it's not a loan, it's not a lease, and it's guaranteed transferable to a new home buyer? Almost the same process of them signing up with PG&E for new energy with their system.
Yeah, so you're getting base. So yes, I think that definitely helps without a doubt. It just comes down to how much are they saving? Like what's the cost to buy that electricity from the Florida company versus from PG&E?
So let me give you the contrast. So 43 cents currently daytime rate for energy cost in California PG&E. So anytime you use PG&E energy up until 3 p.m., 43 cents. From 3 p.m. till 9 p.m., 62 cents in PG&E territory. So 43 to 62. This next era program, generally, the more energy you buy, if you're a heavy energy user like you and I are, you'll get a cheaper rate. It's kind of like Costco. The more you buy, you get bulk pricing. But we're seeing somewhere between, I would say, low side, 18, 19 cents, to mid-20s, 26, 27 on the high side. So imagine being able to get a majority of your energy at literally half the cost, if not more, than the same with PG&E. Plus, the kicker, they cap the growth of it. They cap how much it can go up every year. Currently, PG&E doesn't have a cap on rates, and they don't have a cap on growth, right? Yeah. How many times they can increase the rates. So the cap is 3.5%. So get this. This is how I explain it. Consumer, this is going to cut your bill in half with PG&E for a system you don't have to buy. It's then going to slow the growth to where it takes 21 years before your new bill with the solar equals what you're paying PG&E
right
today.
Now. Yep.
Right?
Love it. And so that it comes down to understanding the difference in the savings. So if that's the main barrier that we see when people are trying to figure out, hey, is this a good decision for my family? Like dollars and cents, what's it going to save? And so if you say, hey, based off the kilowatt hours that the system will produce, this is what the savings are going to be. Absolutely, it's a no-brainer. It's like, I always joke, I wish I could just toss an electrical cord over into my neighbor's house in Roseville and just pull off of his house, But essentially, that's what you're doing. Is now you're pulling from the sun, and now you're getting Roseville SMUD prices in PG&E territory.
You're effectively, what I tell people is it's going back almost 10 years in PG&E territory. If you could buy PG&E energy at a cost from 10 years ago, how much of it would you buy and how much of it would you want?
Yep.
Right? And then additionally, that slowing the growth feature of it, I think, is a real big deal. Slowing the growth is the critical thing, because I think right now we're on the path in California. This next 10 years, so for context, PG&E over the last 10 years has raised rates about 12.5% a year. That's what the effective rate of growth has been. So 12.5% a year, that's caustic. I think this next 10 years is even going to be worse than the prior 10 years because California wants to be carbon neutral by 2040. Newsom wants everyone driving an electric vehicle by 2035. The California Air Resources Board is getting rid of natural gas hot water heaters and furnaces by 2030. So California is going to force more energy usage on us all. PG&E is going to charge us more because they don't want to go bankrupt again. They're spending about $3 million a mile to underground lines. And meanwhile, the California in general wants to be the number 5 economy in the whole world, wants to be carbon neutral in a really aggressive time frame.
Yep.
Right. So I think this next 10 years is going to be worse.
That's before you even said that. That's what I was thinking about. Like, go back 10 years. Okay, 10 years, that's already happened. I'm more nervous about what's the next 10 years look like.
Yeah.
Because that's going to impact my pocketbook. That's going to impact, my affordability in terms of what vacations are we doing, where are we going, and what the value of the home is.
Yeah.
Because if now all of a sudden that discrepancy is just growing between Roseville Electric and PG&E, like, your house is going to be negatively impacted if you don't have some type of a solar system on it.
Think of it this way. I agree. If what we fear comes, houses without solar, I think whatever version of it is that they have, houses without solar are going to be at a big disadvantage compared to houses with solar, because who's going to want to be fully exposed to $1,200, $1,500, whatever the amount is at that juncture.
Yeah, and it's just heartbreaking when I go into some of these houses. There are people on a fixed income. Like, there's no they can't go and work overtime. They spent their life. They budgeted responsibly, and now this curveball has been tossed to them, either through homeowners insurance and or utility costs.
Yeah,
and it's really heartbreaking to see that situation. But here's the thing: is that people are like, sometimes, and I get myself wrapped up in this too. Like, let's not go down to doom and gloom. Let's not worry about what might happen. Let's just live on like what's the situation we're in today. And today, forget what might happen. Today, if you install a solar system, you're money ahead. Yeah. Today, your home is more desirable.
Yes.
Today, your home stands out from a house that doesn't have solar. And so, if you're trying to figure out and project in the future, and you're just feeling uncomfortable with that, like, just know that today you can save money.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Thank you so much, Johnny. I really appreciate your time today. This was a very enlightening conversation.
Yeah, I loved
appreciate
it.
your wisdom and knowledge that you shared with the audience. So thank you very much for your participation today. It was valuable. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So you want to sell your house, you've built up equity, but you don't want to go through all the hassles of open houses. You don't want to do all of those repairs on the floor, get rid of all that junk in the backyard and the garage. Here's what you do. Get a guaranteed offer today for your home in as-is condition. It's fast, it's simple, it's private, it's safe. And again, your home in as-is condition, a guaranteed offer today. Just reach out to Johnny Jennings and the Made for More team. You can just Google Made for More Realty today and get more for your home. You expect more? Get more with Johnny Jennings. License number 581837.
This is Made for More Living with Johnny Jennings, powered by eXp Realty. Online at madeformoreliving.com.
Hey, Johnny, so I have a question. I had a friend of mine, and sadly, her dad died. And she was at the memorial, she was at the funeral, when she was approached by a realtor. And the realtor handed her his card and said, hey, before your dad died, I was talking to him about selling his home, and I just kind of wanted to let you know I'm available. And she was appalled. She could not believe at her dad's funeral she was approached by a realtor. She didn't know if the guy had really talked to her dad or even if the guy knew her dad.
That's crazy.
She just couldn't believe it. Does that happen?
I've never heard of that happening. But
have you ever done that?
I have never done that. I am thinking, though, hey, that might be a fun thing to do at weddings. Go around and go,
really?
hey, bride and groom, I'll offer you a free home inspection if you buy with me.
What do you think about that, though?
That's just insane.
That's not cool to do.
Not cool. What I'm hearing in that situation is somebody who, giving them the benefit of the doubt, has no situational awareness. Like, they're just maybe on the spectrum a little bit, and they're just, hey, I need to be prospecting.
Maybe they just wanted to help the family out,
Maybe they wanted to help them
It can
out.
be a stressful situation. The family's overwhelmed about the property and all the stuff that they have to do for dad. And this realtor just comes along and I'm here to help. Here's my business card.
But what I'm really hearing, so that I'm trying to be like nice about the situation, but what my gut read on this is that person is a struggling real estate agent who needs a deal. And so they've gotten to the point of desperation where they're crashing a funeral to try and pick up business. And
They're hungry. They're eager. I thought that's the kind of person you wanted on your team. You wanted someone who's hungry.
Hungry and eager. So here's a hungry and eager that I like. A guy on our team, we were talking about, so what differentiates us from other people? Like, we have to be clear on what that is, because everybody knows 10 real estate agents, and they want certainty, and they want to know why you're different, why you're better. So we were having this conversation at our daily meeting. So we meet every single day to sharpen our skills. And what he was saying was, we were talking about how are we going to provide value? How are we going to provide more to our clients, right? We're made for more. How are we going to provide more? And so we got a call from somebody, and they were interested in purchasing in a specific community. And it's based off the school district. So he called up the school district, got some information about the schools, about the programs, about the boundary maps. That same day, got it to that buyer. And they were blown away. One, that he did it in the first place, and two, at the speed at which he operated. To me, that's hungry. Hungry is not showing up at a funeral and going, "Hey, want to sell your dead dad's house?" Like that's totally different.
Yeah, that's kind of crossing the line, don't you?
Absolutely crossing the line.
But you're okay if someone did it at a wedding.
I think that'd be funny. Hey, you guys are married. You know what happens after you get married? You're going to get a dog, or you're going to have a baby. Maybe both. You're going to need space.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I love that.
But that's also the difference between somebody who's experienced and not experienced, right? And so some people are like, "Hey, I want somebody who's a young gun and has more time." And I get that, because you want to feel like you're being taken care of, and if that's not happening with somebody else, then yes, there's a problem there. But also you have to ask yourself, why does that person have more time? Why are more people not working with them? Compare that to, why are more people working with somebody else? What's the value they're adding? Is it in their marketing?
So are you saying that it's good to have someone that's not as available?
Can you text your doctor right now? Could you text your doctor and say, "Hey, I got this sniffly nose. What's up?"
But I could text my wife, and she'd probably know what's going on.
You can text your wife. So you think about anybody operating at a high level of professionalism,
successful.
They operate. Their business is a well-tuned machine. They operate as a well-tuned machine, and they're being yanked 50 different directions by their clients. Like, in order to serve you, there's a system and a process. And it's the heart surgeon. Like, oftentimes you meet with the heart surgeon, and then you don't really see him until you're getting wheeled in. He doesn't call you to check in. You can't text him, "Hey, I'm nervous about the process."
Right.
He's not there putting you under. He's not there putting the hospital gowns on you. Like,
right.
there's people to help with that. And so what you need is somebody who's very good at what you've hired them to do. And if somebody has more time, now I'm not saying don't try out another real estate agent. Like, don't try out somebody who's maybe newer in the industry. Just make sure they have somebody in their corner who's experienced. So the people on our team, like, when you hire us, not only are you getting that agent, you're getting 3 additional real estate brokers, not agents. 3 additional real estate brokers that are there to back up and support that agent. So you're getting the benefit of the hunger and the tenacity and the availability backed by experience. But oftentimes people are hiring and they'll typically work for less. That's the other thing. They're more available and they'll work for less. But what are you really getting for your money? And so you just got to figure that out. What works best for you, and what we have found works best for clients is when you net more money, when you have a stronger negotiator, when the seller understands the process, when they have a good reputation in the community and get your offer accepted. That is what is worth the fee paid.
I think there's a lot to discuss here, and I think we should dive more into it on our next show next week.
Let's do it. Thanks so much, Matt.